Hello and welcome to the first video on my research channel, and we are going to start it off by examining the idea of polytheism in the Bible. Now, for those of you who might not know, the word polytheism is the belief in or worship of more than one God. So this already is quite a peculiar idea to a lot of people, because when we think of the Bible, we see it as a monotheist religion, and we think that it only talks about one God. But this view that we are going to be looking into today says that the original Hebrew verses not only talk about multiple gods, but many of the Old Testament names for God are actually the same names of Canaanite or pagan deities. Now, is this true? Well, that's what we are going to be examining in this video. But before we do that, I just want to make one thing clear. This is the first video on my channel, and I don't want people to think that this is a Christian channel or one that covers only that kind of content. I want this to be almost like a borderless channel where I look into all sorts of things, with worldviews being one of them. And amongst that category, we'll discuss a range of things from Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, the ancient Aztec, Mayans, ancient Egyptians, and even atheism. So, there isn't any bounds. It just so happens that the first topic that we are talking about today is one relating to Christianity. Alright, and also before we go into detail on this topic, I just want to read a few verses, a few Bible verses in English, because a lot of people say that you don't even need to look at the original Hebrew to find evidence of multiple gods in the Bible. The Bible kind of talks as if there are other gods, as if they exist, right? Now, I don't know what you think. Some of you might disagree or whatever, but let's look into some of these verses and what they say. Because the idea is that the original Hebrews actually, because if you go back far enough in history, you find that the Hebrew people were very similar to the Canaanites, and if you go back far enough, it even seems like they came from those people. So the idea was that the original Hebrews, like the Canaanites, worshipped many gods, and then over time began to favor one of them, which is the Yahweh God of the Bible, and eventually started believing that there was only one God. But even though this happened, there's still remnants in the Bible of this old view of there being multiple deities that would rule over man. So I've looked into a couple of these verses. Here's an example of one in this picture here. So this is Exodus 12 verse 12, and you can also read it as well and compare it to other versions of the Bible to make a comparison and see if it's accurate. So it says, "I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord." Right now it says gods in plural, and it doesn't say false deities or false icons. It's addressing them as if they are actually physically there. And at the bottom of this image it says, did the biblical God just acknowledge other gods? And you will find that there are many verses like this. For example, in Numbers 33 verse 4 of the King James, it says, "For the Egyptians buried all their firstborns, which the Lord had smitten among them. Upon their gods also the Lord executed judgment." So there we have the words gods with an S again. It doesn't say false idols. And also, how do you execute judgment on something that doesn't exist, right? It talks about them as if they are there. Executed judgment on the gods of Egypt. Now, some of you are probably saying, yeah, but you're taking it out of context, and maybe that's so, that's why we are examining this, and you are also welcome to give your comments and views on this topic. Here we have another. This is a very well-known verse. It's from Exodus 20, verse 3, and it says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." right? So this is one that a lot of people point to. It speaks about them as if they are there, like it doesn't say false idols. Here, okay, this one, you have to read Isaiah 14 verse 13, but in the New Living Translation, and it says, "For you said to yourself," and it's talking about Satan here, God speaking to Satan, and he says, "For you said to yourself, I will ascend to heaven and set my throne above God's stars. I preside on the mountain," this is the interesting one, "the mountain of the gods far away in the north." Here we see a huge parallel with ancient mythology. Many ancient belief systems used to have this idea that the gods would sit on a high up mountain, with the most powerful god being on top. It was spoken about by the ancient Greeks, the Romans, and even in the Vedas. And if you just research Mount Olympus, Mount Olympus, hold on, if you research Mount Olympus, right, they used to believe that the gods would actually sit on this mountain. Okay, pause that. But now, what does the original Hebrew say? And how do we know? I mean, we don't speak Hebrew. Well, before I go on and we look into this topic, I would like to recommend that anyone wanting to learn the Bible, they should get this free software called eSword. It's extremely useful and it's helped me a lot. So today we read the Bible in English, or I don't know, whatever language you have. But the original book was in Hebrew and the New Testament was in Greek. And the problem is, when translating to one version to another, is that there can be mistakes or mistranslations. And I can even give multiple examples of this, and I think I'll do a whole video based on that topic alone. But certain words in the Bible can have, certain Hebrew words can have multiple potential English translations. All right, so what's a good example? Let's take the verse in the Bible where it says God breathed life into man. The word breath could mean breath, it could mean air, it could mean spirit or soul. And you get quite a different meaning if it says God's spirit went into man. So you can actually learn a lot from these scriptures by looking at the original meaning. And also, a problem when translating these books a lot of time is the question, well, this word has multiple potential English translations. Which English word do I translate it to? And a lot of Hebrew, the ancient Old Testament, is poetic, meaning it would purposely use a word that has multiple meanings. Like in poems, a word will have multiple meanings to express multiple ideas, and it uses metaphors. But many of these kinds of things are lost when they are translated. So eSword is a great tool, and what it allows you to do is, here I'm in the program, and to the left here we have the different books of the Bible. Next to that we have the chapters, and you can click on whatever chapter and it gives you the verse, and all you do is you scroll your mouse next to that word and it will give you the original Hebrew as well as all of its potential translations into English. And it's a very useful tool when trying to understand the Bible itself. It's actually taught me many things. Another thing that is useful is, like, when it comes to translations, is to compare verses with multiple other translations. But now, not just modern translations, I would also recommend you look at something called the Codex Sinaiticus. Now, what is the Codex Sinaiticus? This is the oldest copy of the whole complete Bible ever discovered, with the full Old Testament and New Testament. It also has some other books included, though, that is not present in these modern Bibles. Now, why would you want to be looking at the oldest text? Because distortion tends to happen over time. We have the original text, then newer versions, certain things change, right? So the more further we go back into the past, the more accurate it can be. Now, all you do is go into see manuscripts, and here we'll give you a picture of the original text. You see, a lot of this is fragmented, which means that the text they found, the scrolls, is largely destroyed. So they have bits and pieces, and they had to kind of put it together like a puzzle, right? So there will be some verses missing, but if we go to the New Testament, they have a lot of content there. So here we have a book in the New Testament. We have the original Greek here to the right, and just under that you can see the English translation. Another awesome tool is the Wycliffe Bible, which was the first Bible to be completely translated into English. Now there were other texts before that of this book where sections were translated into English, but this guy Wycliffe, he was the first person to take all the books and chapters and put them into English. So it's a great tool when you're trying to get back to the source material. Right, now with all that being said, we are going to look at some of the original Hebrew. Now, what I want to start with is this verse in Exodus 12, verse 12, right? So, when looking into this topic, it's very important to understand a certain word, and this is Elohim. And to describe this word, I'm going to go to Exodus 12, verse 12. 12, verse 12 in Esword. Oh wait, another thing I forgot to mention is, when learning about the Bible, also see if you can get the Strong Coordinates Dictionary. Again, what it does is it takes all the Hebrew words in the Bible and translates it into English. You can go learn more about it on YouTube. So yeah, we're going to go to back to what I was saying. We're going to go to Exodus 12, verse 12. Let's see, 12 here. And it says, "For I will pass through the land of Egypt this night, and will smite all the firstborns in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, against all the gods." So here we have that word again, gods in the plural. But now, what does the original Hebrew say? Let's click on it. And there's that word I've been speaking about. So here's the Hebrew, and here's what it means. It is Elohim. So the word for gods in plural is Elohim. And when we look at the English meaning of this word, here it says here plural in the plural when they define it, and it says gods in the ordinary sense, but specifically used in the plural, thus especially with the article, so there it's saying that this word means gods in the plural. It can also have some other meanings as well. If we go further down, sometimes as so it can also mean angels, right? So, and a couple of other things. But now, why is this word important? Well, so this word means gods. Why is it important? Well, if we go back to Genesis 1 verse 1. Now, a lot of you know this verse. It says, "In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth," right? But what is the original translation for the word God here? Well, if we click on it and we check, it is Elohim, which is, as written here, gods in the plural. And so it's actually saying, in the beginning, the gods created the heavens and the earth. Well, this is quite interesting. It seems like the Bible is actually talking about polytheism, as if there are many gods mentioned in this book, right? But then there's also the skeptic interjection here saying, "No, but Andrea, that is talking about the Holy Trinity of God. Remember, God is one person, but he is also three: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit," right? And for a while this made a lot of sense to me, until I also started recognizing that many of these names for God in the Old Testament are also names of pagan deities. So every time we read the word God in the Old Testament, you will often find that the original Hebrew actually gives a specific name, like El, Elohim, Jehovah, Yahweh, and many of these are actually pagan deities. Even Shamash, and that is something that I'm actually going to be discussing in further detail now. Alright, so here I have a verse in front of me, and it is Exodus chapter 6 verse 3. And when we read it, this is what it states. It says, "And I appeared unto Abraham, unto Isaac, and unto Jacob by the name of God." Okay, we're going to be coming back to this name of God, Almighty, but by the name of Jehovah was I not known to them. So what is the name of God? There's often talk amongst Christians about saying that, talking about the name of God, but in the modern translations of the Bible, we have lost the original word used for God in this verse, right? But if we were to take our mouse and scroll over and click next to the word, and you can either read this in the bottom here or in this little pop-up box, it says El, right? The name of God is El. And if you read the definition here, it basically just means God. So why is this important or interesting? Well, let me show you. So where is it? Here I am on the New World Encyclopedia. The website is www.newworldencyclopedia.org, and if we scroll down to the under Pantheon of the Canaanite Religion. So this is the Canaanite religion here, which is a pagan belief system which was spoken against by the Bible. And it says, "The Canaanite pantheon was conceived as a divine clan headed by the supreme god El." So their supreme god, or their main god who is on top, his name is El, and that was the name and also word for God. And if we look here, the name of God spoken about in the Bible, or actually in this particular verse, because the Old Testament does give many different names for God, but the one spoken about here is El, right? So it uses the same name, but then if we read a little bit more, it says the gods, so now the gods in plural collectively made up the Elohim. Ah, this is interesting. Remember that verse I showed you in Genesis 1 verse 1? It says, "In the beginning God," which the original Hebrew says gods, as in the plural. It says, "In the beginning the gods created the heavens and the earth." And this is very similar to the Canaanite mythology, where the gods came together and they first made heaven and they first made earth. So it not only uses El for the name of God, but it also uses the same name for the gods which exist under God, which is the Elohim. Also notice that when we look at the word Elohim, it starts with these two letters, El, which is the name for the Canaanite god. And basically what Elohim means is the gods which exist under the hierarchy of El, and that's why it's Elohim. It's kind of like the Anunnaki. Now, the Anunnaki in mythology was also a group of gods, right? Let me type this, Anunnaki, right? It was the name for their gods. Let's just read up a bit about them. So these were gods in ancient the Anunnaki are a group of deities in ancient Mesopotamian culture. Now, why were they called Anunnaki? Well, if you type Anu mythology here, oh well, Google just corrected me. So Anu is a Sumerian, in Sumerian is An, is a Mesopotamian sky god, right? So the Anunnaki are the gods that exist under the main god Anu, just like the Elohim are the gods which exist under El. That's why the word Anunnaki has Anu at the beginning of it. It means those who are descendant of Anu, or those who come under Anu. Now, some people think that Anunnaki actually means those who from the heaven came, so those who came from the heavens or the sky. And the reason why they believe it says this is because although Anu is a name of a particular god, it's also a word in their language, and it means sky. And their main supreme god is called sky, because in their mythology they believed he came from the sky. So this could mean two things. It could either mean those who descended from Anu, who came from the sky, or those who came from, the heavens, right? Also, El is known as coming from the heavens or the sky. If you actually read up about him here, I'm actually reading Wikipedia about the god El, and I'm just going to click here. Wait, there we go. It goes El, and then in brackets it goes Father of Heaven. So he was considered the Father of Heaven. He was also associated with Saturn, as you can see here. And you'll see why that is important later on. Right, but we see this similarity between these two cultures. Now, what's interesting about about El is actually El appears at the beginning of a lot of names of angels. We have Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, right? In fact, if I were to type names of angels, let's see what I find here. You see, we have here we have El at the end, Raziel, Raphael. So, why do they all even their holy land, Israel? Now, where's Israel located? Well, Israel is located where the ancient land of Canaan was. So that's also another thing that's quite interesting. And it's quite similar to the Canaanite mythology, because if you think about it, who were the Elohim when we're talking about the Canaanites? They were gods that worked under the hierarchy of the main god, El. Now, who are the angels in Christian religion? They are the supreme beings that work under the main God of the Bible, and they do His will. And if you think about it, the view of angels is actually very similar to the idea of gods, because if you look at the meaning of gods, it can also be defined as a supernatural being or spirit worshipped as having power over nature. Now, although the Christians don't worship their angels, they are these supernatural beings. So the Canaanite gods just became angels. And how the word Elohim can actually mean gods in the plural, or it can also mean angel. I don't know if I mentioned that before, but here we have in the beginning, the gods created the heavens and the earth. One of its alternative meanings is angels. And that's why we have Jehovah Elohim. Some verses would actually say Jehovah Elohim, which means the Jehovah angel. Now, Jehovah is actually a interesting character if you look at the meaning.